The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
We need a president who respects science, who understands that the damage from climate change is already here.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
East. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 2, The Manifesto. I'm Ian Collins. It's a Friday, which means we open up the gates for a thorough discussion on all matters green, the environmental stories that have crossed the news agenda over the last week. Nothing escapes the gaze of this podcast. Dale Vince is our man with the joystick on matters. Morning, Dale.
Yeah, morning, Ian.
Good one to start with, actually. The curious conundrum of the UK government's green agenda. I think we could put it like that, because every week we seem to catch out not a small but a fairly glaring contradiction in policy. And we now read this week that ministers will allow oil drillers to keep exploring the North Sea for new reserves, despite the government's pledge to tackle carbon emissions. This is filed under the category of you couldn't make this stuff up.
Yeah, they're a bit like Schrodinger's cat, aren't they? You know, they kind of are green or they are not green, both at the same time, it would appear, because, you know, we've had the 10 pointless plan from Johnson, then we've seen the coal mine waved through, third runway of Heathrow, the Drax extension to make the biggest gas power station in Europe, and now this, and not just allowing exploration in the North Sea, but investing a total of £16 billion in that. And to make it even worse, dressing that up is being presented as an important part of the transition away from oil and gas, which is just incredible. I mean, this is straight out of 1984, some kind of double speak, I would call it. Because, you know, it is actually the opposite. It's not part of the transition. It's extending the use of fossil fuels, and it's the last thing we need to be doing.
Yeah, but the government said it's a landmark deal. It would help support the oil and gas industry's transition to clean energy in the future.
Yeah, but by giving them another 10 or 20 years to drill for oil and gas, I mean, how does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense.
Many Green campaigners felt that the UK would follow other countries, I think Denmark and France, who've agreed to ban new oil exploration and won't even give out licenses for anything new. So there's precedent just over the channel of countries adopting a more robust approach, but clearly our government have decided not to.
Yeah, we can see how it needs to be done. And I mean, there are plenty of precedents more widely in terms of what we need to do to get to zero carbon. So like in the last few days, or just before the North Sea announcement, the government also announced they were cutting the support for electric cars because, of course, they're not part of the answer to the climate crisis, are they? And so, you know, here you've got a government chucking 16 billion into the North Sea to ease the transition or help the transition, as they say, and withdrawing support from electric cars. I mean, where's the support for that transition? We've only got 200,000 electric cars on the road out of 30 million. I mean, you know, the transition's barely begun, really, but the government say they can't afford it. And we did the maths, and actually last year it cost about 300 million quid.
Wow. So it's doable.
Yeah.
This ties in actually from Dawn on Facebook, who says, how about the government stops HS2 and pumps that money into tax-free solar power and electric cars, which kind of feeds in again to the sort of enormous contradictions that we seem to stumble across on their policy here.
Yeah, the government can always find money for some of these, what do you call them, virility projects, some people call them, like HS2, nuclear power, and, you know, pumping up the North Sea, that kind of stuff. I mean, they find billions and tens of billions for this kind of stuff, but when it comes to green stuff, it's just too expensive.
Yeah. Here's one, and I never thought this sentence would be anything we would utter. Penises are shrinking because of pollution. There you go, I've said it.
Yeah, I saw that story last week. I thought it was interesting because quite often when you get into a debate about the environment and, you know, the environment crisis and what the cause of that is, people will pipe up and say, it's not about climate change. You know, it's not about what the fact is there are too many people on the planet and that's growing into an uncontrollable number. But this study, and it was a very big study of global fertility, suggests that there won't be any fertility by around 2045, so the population growth may actually be at zero. It's very interesting compared to the kind of conventional view that population growth is out of control. I don't think that it is, but this is caused by a cocktail of chemicals that are in everyday products. They're all around us, and they bioaccumulate in our bodies, and they're affecting fertility. And I think from memory, it said that guys today have got half the fertility age 30 that their grandfathers had, and something similar for women.
And it's also literally the length of your willy as well.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. So kids born today will be inferior in terms of, not that it's, it's not a competition, but nonetheless, it is. I know sometimes, when we're in the traps, we think it is, but it's nonetheless interesting that because of industrial chemicals, literally, it is shrinking the size of your penis.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, from my perspective, it's more interesting that it's putting a crimp on population growth, which is almost like nature kind of reacting to what it is that we're doing to the planet, although we're doing it to ourselves as well. We're kind of like our own worst enemy and answer to the problem that we pose ourselves. If you get what I mean, population will be controlled because of our crazy lifestyle.
Here's one from Carl on Twitter who says, I hope the fishermen come after you for damage to their boats if they hit your rock. You should be ashamed. I think the question needs some explanation, Dale. What's going on here?
Yeah, I joined Greenpeace in an action a few weeks ago. They've started or had started dropping boulders into marine protection zones to prevent trawling. I think it's a bit of a scandal that we've got 40 of these so-called marine protection zones. Most of them are fished, like all but 4, and 3/4 of them are trawled, which is the most destructive form of fishing that you could dream up. I mean, just destroys everything on the ocean bed. So not a lot of protection there. And Greenpeace came up with the genius idea, I think, of dropping rocks, an array of rocks across a marine protection zone so that trawlers don't drag their nets across it because they'll lose or damage their nets. And so there's one right now at the bottom of the English Channel, just off Brighton, with my name on it. And, it's protecting fish there, which I'm really chuffed about. The fishermen know they're there. The chances of them damaging their nets are very small because, they just won't go there. And that's the whole purpose of it. It's like a deterrent. But what I really like about it is not just activism, it's really practical activism. And I think of it as practivism because, it actually stops this fishing in these protected areas, which is perfect. Worth saying, an addendum to this story, a couple of days ago, the government announced that they are going to ban trawling and fishing in the marine protection zones. They're going to do it over 3 years. They're not going to do it in a hurry. Yeah. But it looks like they've done it in reaction to Greenpeace's campaign. So that worked.
You've got to buy more rocks.
Maybe not now.
Yeah, that's the problem. Here's a great story. We've touched on this many, many times. And that is the latest must-have thing for US billionaires is a plan to end the climate crisis. It does seem that everybody, we've got Elon Musk, Bill Gates in there as well, Jeff Bezos, everybody seems to have decided that this is their focus now.
I saw that story and yeah, I think it's interesting, and it's the issue of our times, isn't it? The climate crisis. So perhaps it's not surprising that some of the world's richest, most powerful people would pick it up as a cause. I don't know what these guys are going to do about it, but it can't be a bad thing. I hope.
I suppose philanthropy and benevolence and where you throw large chunks of money changes over the years. I guess to be ultra skeptical here. Or cynical on this would be that it's the agenda of the moment, and that is what they're latching onto. Or would that be unfair on these guys who may have genuine concerns? I mean, Bill Gates has just released a book about driving emissions down to zero. Is he for real? Do you believe him?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think we can't know why any or all of them have got engaged in this subject, but it definitely is the topic of the moment. It's the zeitgeist, and why shouldn't it occur at that end of the spectrum, let's say, in terms of wealth and power, as well as it does to the everyday person on the street, where, I mean, we all care about it. And across that spectrum, there'll always be people that jump on it for other reasons. But I'm going to assume until I know otherwise, that these guys have jumped on it for the right reasons.
For the right reasons. Good work. This from Ben, who says, I saw Seaspiracy this week. Oh my God, forget my obsession with plastic straws. I'm thinking long and hard now about giving up fish, even before giving up meat. I thought fish was better for me and the planet.
Yeah, I think it's one of the big wake up messages coming out of this film. Actually, a lot of people have said the same thing. I mean, exactly the same thing. Plastic is a problem, yes, but the damage being done to the sea, the destruction to wildlife in the oceans is incredible, and it's easily on a par with the destruction that we're wreaking on land-based wildlife and habitats through intensive animal farming. And it's relatively unknown, and this film is shining a spotlight on that.
Yeah. This is a Netflix documentary, and you're one of the producers, right?
Yeah, I'm an exec producer of the film. Yeah, and that all began about 4 years ago, I think,
Yeah, yeah.
when Kip, the guy that made it, came to see us and said he wanted to make a ocean version of Cowspiracy, his previous film.
The best place to live in the Southwest has been revealed in the Sunday Times annual guide for 2021. And Stroud was named as the best overall place in Britain to be.
Yeah,
Your patch.
yeah, that was a bit of a surprise, I have to say.
Is that because you're there, do you think, Dale? Is that why?
No, I must have just landed lucky, like I did with this climate thing. These issues have been bothering all of my life, and some people say, "Oh, you're ahead of head of trends. You've spotted them well. You've got in early and stuff like that." I think I mentioned that in my book, but I don't see it that way. I've just been bothered about these things forever, and I'm just very lucky. I think fortunate that the world is moving this way, and so maybe I just happen to be lucky to be living in what the Sunday Times now describe as the best place in Britain to live. Who knows? But it's a lovely place. And, I stopped here 30 years ago in my trailer parked up on a hill. And that's when I had the big idea to drop in and build a windmill. But it's a lovely place. It's got some really creative people. It's open, it's friendly. It's got everything.
A lot of questions coming in, Dale, as well on this weekend's football.
Yeah, tomorrow we play Bolton. It's a bit of a top of the table clash. I think they're just a couple of points behind us. And it's on Sky, and it's a little bit exciting.
I mean, I can't really ask you as the club chairman for a prediction, can I? Because, I mean, obviously the only answer is that you guys are going to win.
Well, people ask for predictions all the time, and I always say the same thing. I actually don't know. Obviously, I hope that we win, but it's football, and it's a very difficult game to predict.
It's incredibly difficult to predict, of course, and we've all seen those kind of bogey teams that pitch up and do terrible damage to top flight clubs, and the history books of football are full of those kind of moments. But it is just worth noting that you guys are playing particularly well at the moment, and there's definitely a sense of momentum around Forest Green Rovers.
Yeah, we're third in the final automatic promotion place with about 10 games to go. So it's a kind of exciting time of the season. And I would say neither us nor Bolton are kind of bogey teams. We're both in a good place. And it's a proper clash for a top slot in the league. So it should be exciting. It should be good. It's on TV. It's on Sky.
Good work. This final one from Claire on Facebook. Heard you with Max and Barry on the Guardian Football Weekly podcast. What a breath of fresh air in football, particularly your views on betting and junk food. My team could learn a thing or two. I'm now listening back to episodes of your podcast and wondering if it's not too cheesy to have a second club. There you go. So Claire doesn't declare who her first club is, by the way, which is slightly disappointing. But nonetheless, let's just look at that issue of betting and junk food. What are those areas that clearly Claire and others picked up on?
Yeah, we were talking about sponsorship, and the other guys on the panel were saying it's wrong for football to be sponsored by Gazprom and stuff like that. The topic we were talking about was sustainability and football, how they go together. And I was just saying that we don't take sponsorship from companies who are doing things that we don't believe in. The question to me was, how can you do that? Doesn't it make it harder? And I don't think it does make it harder. I think we all have to have principles and places where we won't go. And for us, fast food is being sport washed. Fossil fuels are being sport washed as well, actually. But gambling, I think, is taking over football in particular, and I think it's a real problem. The government have been talking about banning it, so you know how bad it is if that happens, because these guys aren't usually ahead of the curve.
True. Yeah, I think certainly watch this space when you consider the amount of debates we do on the issue of gambling separate to football. And then you factor in just how massive they have become in terms of football sponsorship, TV ads, big celebrities putting their name to all of this. There is I always think there's a slightly uncomfortable fit there.
Yeah, gambling is a pretty harmful industry, yeah, for people that can't control it as a habit, I guess.
Yeah.
An amusing thing on the podcast though was, as we were in mid-flow, the team leading it got a tweet from the Guardian saying, "Don't call it climate change. You have to call it the climate crisis, because that's more appropriate language." And so it occurred to me to just pipe up and say, "How long do you think it will be, guys, before we have to up the language and call it the climate clusterfuck?"
I like it. And that is what I want to hear Boris Johnson say next time at the dispatch box. I'd pay good money to see it.
Yeah. And they kept it in the episode. I thought they would cut it out, but they liked it. I'm waiting to see it in the Guardian next.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's remained in the edit on this episode as well. Fantastic.
Nice one.
Dale, have a cracking week. We'll speak next Friday.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ian.
Good work. That's it for this episode. Don't forget, of course, you can follow this podcast from your podcast provider. That means you get each new episode automatically. It's also appreciated if you leave a review there as well. If you want to get in touch, very simple. You can email your comments and questions, zerocarbonista@ecotricity.co.uk. And absolutely vital, do make sure you follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/Dale Vince, facebook.com/Dale Vince.
Zero Carbon
East of